Good. Nice.
With the girl and them, bring the girl and them. Watch this. You girl over there, time to make a movie. Say you girl over there, let we make a movie. You girl over there, time to make a movie. Say you girl over there. 1, 2, 3, action. Bend over, bend over, bend over. Showtime. Bend over, bend over, bend over. Showtime.
Right. Good evening, folks. I hope, all you enjoyed all of the entertainment that was taking place this week with respect to news and news in general. Let me just adjust my volumes and thing here. Right. Nice. So all you on the inside. Let me pull this up here. Hi, Kwame. Hi, Cindy, David, Lakeisha, Shaquille, Mary Chandler, Janelle Speth, Rosemary, Barbara, Lenlise, Renee, Gemma. Right. Good. All you reach, all you hear, all you locked in. I even had to say build it live. Christopher Francis, I see you out of Facebook jail. Look, Karima still not making no child for you. I just saying, I just throwing that out there. Just letting you know, don't show up on the live to ask me if I go make the child for you. Because no, I'm not making no child for you. Yeah, Christopher, I see you were in Facebook jail. Hi, Kathy Ann. Hi, Cheryl. So, it's interesting that Christopher is here, having been in Facebook jail. My personal profile, my Rhoda Barrett profile, is currently in Facebook jail. So, I will only be posting things on News Source this week. I don't have, I think for 6 or 7 days again, my personal profile is in Facebook jail, but the News Source page is fine. Hi, Andel. Nice to see you. Hi, Linda. Good. Crix Roti. I will be live on YouTube very soon because I was doing a test this afternoon. So let me just do some housekeeping things here. There are a number of things that I need to inform you guys about before I get into this evening's topic, right? So I'm testing a new piece of software so that I can actually do the show live on Facebook, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. So that way, people on 3 channels, right, across 3 channels, will be able to look at me. So if you're in Facebook jail and you can't use your Facebook account, but you're on YouTube, you can take me in on YouTube. If you prefer Twitter, you'll be able to take me in on Twitter. So I did a test this evening with Tech Guy. And so, eventually we're going to be launching that. I'm hoping to launch that by the next show, right? Which will be next weekend. So that way I will be across multiple platforms. So you ain't have to come to Facebook to be able to see me live. You could see me live on YouTube, and then of course it will back up onto my YouTube channel. It will also be on my Facebook page, etc. Nicole, hear you about Tech Guy working, but how nobody does assume that I working. I had to remind Tech Guy today that he gets paid, right? But Tech Guy is actually saying to me, he going on a walk while the live taking place for his, his mental health and mental well-being. I say, horse, getting your salary at the end of the month is part of your mental well-being too, eh? So I believe he may actually be paying attention to this live this evening. But so I did a test earlier on today. I was streaming on YouTube but was not streaming on Facebook for whatever reason. So we have a couple kinks to work out, and once we have worked out those kinks, I will be able to stream across 3 platforms so you could watch me wherever it is you want to watch me. Good. So next thing, Friday, I didn't do a live, and I didn't do a live on Friday for very basic reasons. There was some stuff that I had to do work-wise, my other job, the job that I pay my bills with, and that ran all the way down to about 5:30 of me troubleshooting a particular issue, and it was actually a tech issue that I was troubleshooting. For those of you who think that only Tech Guy have tech skills. So I was trying to troubleshoot this thing 2 days straight. It didn't sort out. I only got it sorted out by about 5 o'clock on Friday evening. And I don't like to do unprepared lives. There is no way I'm just going to show up here and sit down in front of my camera and just talk to all you just so without having done the necessary preparations. It's just not my style. Other people who like to just sit down and say wherever it is coming to their head and let pass through their mouth, or in some instances it's pass through the next end and then come through their mouth. I glad for them. That's not me. That's not my style. I can't do those things at all. So this evening, all you had to bear serious patience with me. And you all had to bear serious patience with me, because while, yes, we're going to be talking about the Bacchs, we will eventually have to sober up and talk about the facts. And that's because I feel we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be, if we can't be honest with ourselves, we can't be honest with nobody else. And we need, as a society, to admit to a couple things about ourselves. We need to admit that we like gossip. We need to admit that we like bacchanal. We need to admit that we like to run down rumors. We like to jump in people's inbox and say, hey, you ain't here. We like to do them kind of thing. And me shaming nobody who like to do them things. You like to do that? You like to do that. Bacchs is your thing, Bacchs is your thing. But where you have to start to pull up your socks is when you are at the point of Bacchs loving, right? And Bacchs being your whole life, that you are hurting people and hurting a society and hurting a nation, right? You need to stop and take stock and check yourself. If you just like to run down gossip to the point where you could actually be hurting people with your need to run down gossip. So we're going to be talking about the Paria tragedy. We have to talk about the Paria tragedy. That's all everybody talking about. But I will not be talking about the Paria tragedy from the perspective of who has to be blamed and who is to blame and who is not to blame. That's not the angle I want to discuss this from. I want to discuss this from the perspective of what we know and what we don't know, right? That's how I want to talk about it. I want to talk about what information we have versus what information we don't have. I'm not here to arrive at any conclusions about anything. And that's because I am generally very slow to arrive at conclusions about things. And as we talk about this issue this evening, you're going to see that since last week, Friday evening, I would say from roughly about 5 p.m. thereabout, maybe between 5 and 6, somewhere thereabouts, this story was in my consciousness, and I had already started having a conversation about the details that are missing from the story, right? So, in Tech Guy posted this afternoon, and again, I had a big up Tech Guy. All I said to him was I wanted to talk about people who just leap to conclusions and land hard off a cliff. And he sends me Evil Knievel, aka Philip Edward Alexander, Ansel de Balance Roger, Ian Allen, and Marsha Walker. All right? So this week, all of them star, especially Philip, because Philip see a tragedy. And when it comes to national tragedy, Philip is the King Kobo of national tragedy. If there is a tragedy, if there is a whiff of a tragedy, if there is the possibility that there could be a tragedy, King Kobo Philip, right? Baccarat Johnny, they smell the possibility of that tragedy and boom shot. He on it. Listen, the thing don't even get time to rot. It don't even get time to decay. Philip does be there on that tragedy. And in many instances, not too far behind, there's be a whole bunch of other persons who are invariably associated either with the opposition or satellites of the opposition, right? So you had King Kobo, right? So not the king of rock and roll, because some people thought was Elvis Presley. Some people make out as Evil Knievel, right? But King Kobo and the Kobolettes, right? They're circling. So you had, and I want to, I just want to look at a couple of the Kobo and them, and then we're going to get down to the serious issue. You had Susie the speculator, because of course, no piece of bacchanal could pass and Suzette ain't pass she mouth on it. She bound to must wash she mouth, right? So Suzette jump up, and one of the first things come out Suzette's mouth is, what if those men stumbled upon something that could have violated an international sanction? So immediately, when this thing take place, by Saturday, Sunday, thereabouts, Madame Suzette Lowe jumps out and begins to imply that the reason people haven't gone to look for the body, or the bodies have not yet been retrieved, is that it's some conspiracy, because there's a possibility that they stumbled upon something out in the water. Mind you, they're what, 10 meters away from the shoreline? So they're still in Trinidad and Tobago waters. It's not like they was in Venezuelan waters. It's not like they was in international waters. We still in Trinidad and Tobago waters, but homegirl jump up to talk about violation of international sanctions. It had nothing to explain, nothing to clarify, nothing to even make sense of the foolishness coming out of Suzette's mouth and being typed onto her Facebook feed, right? But that's the first thing she jumped out with. And I mean, I caught that fairly early on in the game in terms of when it was posted. But it's the kind of comments that people just be responding with underneath these posts. And you look on and you're wondering, what going on upstairs here? Anything going on upstairs here? It have a synapse at all, like even one synapse? And for those of you who may not be clear about what a synapse is the space between one nerve ending and another nerve ending. For a thought to occur, energy has to run from one synapse, leap across, and get across to the next synapse. And that's how you know you are thinking and responding to stimuli, right? So I looked at that post and I was like, maybe Suzette Lowe is an amoeba. Maybe she is a single cell organism, because Suzette can't be a polycell organism. She can't have more than 2 cells. She can't. If Suzette Lowe have 2 cells, I'm real surprised. Because if you have 2 cells, then it means that things could jump from one cell to the next cell. And then there might be like a whole thought, like a complete thought that takes place. This is not a complete thought. Oh God, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. This is not a complete thought. This is like passing gas. So Suzette Lowe comes onto Facebook and just fart. And this is what happens when she comes onto Facebook and just farts. So that's that. Then of course, I mean, there are a whole range of posts I could have put up from Philip, but I ain't decide to put up all of them various posts. So obviously, with Philip, it's always political. He starts off feeding off the tragedy. So of course, Philip, King Kobo, obviously has to be, the biggest obeah man in the country, because he just, lighting candle, left, right, and center. I'm not sure that when hurricane season come, it have candle for all it to use for emergency purposes. As a matter of fact, when hurricane season kick in at the end of May and ODPM send out the notice to tell all you, buy candles and stock up on candles for the hurricane season, all you go by Philip. Because Philip have all the candle in the country. All. A tragedy happens and the absolute first thing that Philip will be doing is organizing to have a vigil. But of course, only certain tragedies, not all tragedies, because only certain groups, certain people, certain things are worthy of being a tragic event that requires a candlelight vigil. And I want all you to pinch all yourself. pick sense from nonsense because people is be making it very clear which issues are important to them versus which issues are not. So you see, come we done in March. Come May month end, when all you need candle and all you cannot find candle, I just letting all you know, all the candle by Philip. So they could go buy Philip and buy candle because I doubt that Philip and them leave any candle in any of them stores anymore. I doubt. If all you go in a grocery and find candle, message me and tell me which grocery all you find any candle and I'm in, please, because I need to buy some candle for when the hurricane season come. Right? So that's Philip and Nat willing to work with any other organization to make here a better country. And there are a number of implications behind this. Of course, the obvious thing is his political ambitions. And we know, we've been done know that Philip has political aspirations. That ain't news to anybody. Even though every 2 weeks he just resign from politics and leave politics, just as soon as he resigned from politics and leave politics, he just jump right back in because he can't help himself. Because for people like Philip, the only avenue, when you've gone from the range of things that he has done or not done in this lifetime, the end point for him is politics. To get into politics, to be able to get access to the treasury, because everybody know the treasury totats is the end goal for everybody. When you have gotten to the level that Philip has gotten to, where people funding his lifestyle, people sending him money for various things, then you know that the next step for him is the treasury, because the treasury totats, that's what it is. That is the Taj Mahal, right? That's the height of aspirations for people like Philip, because of course it's all about eating our food, right? That's what it comes down to. And if it means that you have to capitalize off certain tragedies and certain misfortunes, you will do that. So we know and we are aware that normally in this country, union means anti-government. And every 5 years, unions will decide whether they are willing to make friendly with the government or make friendly with the opposition to be able to swing their influence and put who they want to put into government. This happens every 5-year cycle or whenever there is a general election. You will always see that. Back in 2010, we had the entire trade union movement throw its weight behind the People's Partnership, especially through the MSJ, and get themselves into government. So there was a sense in which union was in government. Then the very same unions that would have assisted the People's Partnership in getting into government then threw its weight behind the People's National Movement in 2015, and they were able to get what was then the opposition into government. And so it goes back and forth. But what is also critical and important to remember here is in 2018, there was a huge impasse between the sitting government and the OWTU union. That's when Petrotrin, the refinery, was to be sold. Petrotrin was being shut down. Petrotrin was being revamped. And there are thousands of embittered persons. You see, you had full-time staff who got a good severance package with the shutdown of Petrotrin. And then you had contract and part-time staff who got the shitty end of the stick for a range of reasons. But the most important reason is that the union didn't think that its role was to represent those employees. And I'm saying that in big because it is recently that I found out that the government at that point in time actually invited the union to represent all employees, to represent the interests of all employees at that point in time. But OWTU didn't necessarily make an effort to represent all employees. So what you had was, you had the full-time employees, permanent employees, they were the ones that got better packages, and contract employees and part-time employees, contract and freelance employees, they got, I think, like maybe 2 months severance kind of thing, right? That was the weakest package that they would have gotten. And there were other inducements. People were supposed to be able to apply for land. They were actually dissuaded from applying for land. There are a whole bunch of things. And if you go back to 2018 and you check through news stories at that point in time, check through comment threads at that point in time, even speak to your friends and relatives who may or may not have, who would have been working Petrotrin, you are going to hear a list of grievances with how the shutdown occurred, how the negotiations occurred, who benefited, who didn't benefit from the negotiations. So you have people that are sour about that. And so this is why I say it's important for us to be honest with ourselves about how we just react to things. Because it seems to me in this past week that it went beyond a tragedy, a very tragic accident, to people deciding that they're going to capitalize off a very tragic accident and allow all the grievances to come up to the surface. So who vexed with the government because is the government? That float up to the surface. Who vexed with the government because they shut down Petrotrin and created Paria? That floated to the surface. Who vexed with the government because of ethnicity issues? That and all float up to the surface. Because there was a point in time this week I was looking at comments and commentary, and it was almost as if people believed that this accident had a tribal, racist, ethnic element to it. And I paused and I said to myself, we really reach where we go in and pass it, you know. People really and truly think that this accident that took place, this tragedy that took place, had some sort of race element to it. And I was like, okay, right. So that's one of Philip's posts. There's another thing from Philip, right? Of course, the candle man, right? With the candle thing. Then recently here, like yesterday, day before yesterday, I was looking for the screenshot and couldn't find the screenshot. Is to see that Marsha Walker decide that because the DMO would have indicated on the death report that the time of death was Monday, Marsha and Ian Allen pelt out a road, run down the tongue to let everybody know the divers were alive from Friday to Monday in the pipe, and so they could have been saved. Olia, I didn't know if I wanted to cry because of how stupid the comment was, or if I wanted to cry over the way in which they are just gaslighting this nation and riling up people and causing anxieties. So let me put it this way, because I was talking to Tech Guy about it this morning and I said, but we both know if somebody was to die in my house this morning, 6 o'clock this morning, let me say it have a body in my house, and the DMO only come 7 o'clock here tonight when the lives start to check the body and pronounce the body dead. When they do the report, what the report is going to say is that the person died at 7 p.m. on Sunday, not 6 a.m. when I would have discovered the person dead. 7 p.m. because that's how they go about doing these records. That's how they because the first person qualified to declare the body dead would be the DMO, the district medical officer. So I don't know if you all remember this, but I remember that it was late one night. It would have been late the Monday night that the bodies were moved from Paria's compound because they had a whole bunch of police taking them to the San Fernando General Hospital, and then the following day, the Tuesday, the bodies would have then been moved to the forensic center in St. James, right? So, by my reckoning, whichever CMO, whichever DMO examined the bodies, and I'm assuming it would have been the DMO in San Fernando General Hospital, right? So the DMO there examining the bodies would have decided, okay, time of death is Monday, because that's when they saw the bodies, and that is the first person who would have been in a position to pronounce the person's dead officially. So when I see that, and here now, I had big people messaging me to tell me, you see, there was a live until. So I was like, where you get that information from? And then they send me the Ian Allen thing, they send me a set of other screenshots, they send me the thing with Marsha Walker, and I said, so you get a gallery of dunces to tell all you something like that. They ain't surely no forensic report. They ain't sure, nobody is able to tell you all precisely how these persons would have been alive from Friday to Monday. But you're forwarding this foolishness to me to ask me whether or not it's true. You know, me lying to tell you. It has some days I just want to log off all my accounts, you know. I just want to log off Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, everything, and just not engage. Because when people decide that they're going to listen to a gallery of dunces and then come into my inbox to ask me, is this true? I pause and think to myself, wait now, is gaslight? They're trying to gaslight me too? Nah, boy. No. There was exactly Josiane. Right? It's like critical thinking, analytical thinking, they just fly straight out of people's head. So somebody sends you something that's salacious, something that juicy looking, something that interesting, and then you just decide, yeah, this making sense, you know, this making sense. Exactly, Barbara. It was not the time of death. It is the time that they pronounce the person dead. And I'm like, huh? Really? So you're trying to tell me that between Friday night to Monday evening, or Monday whenever, when they would have been recovered, there's this massive air bubble down inside that pipe? Well, it come now, man. Right? Then you had people who were so upset. They were actually, and this is what got me vexed with Inshan. You see, doxing, D-O-X-X-I-N-G. Doxing is not a crime here, but it should be. If Faris would get off his tail and start a process and draft certain kinds of legislation, there's a whole bunch of things that people is be getting away with on social media that they will not be able to get away with. I was a victim of doxing, and let me remind you all what I mean. Devant Maraj, and this is something Devant and I talk about all the time. I tell him it's one of the things that I'm still annoyed about, still very pissed off about. That when they look to release information about me having a contractual arrangement with NLCB in the public domain, nobody chose to remove my phone number and address off the documents. As much as I possibly can, when I put up information, I just block people's phone number and address, because I feel it's not necessary to put people's personal information out in the public domain, because it puts you at risk. It can put you in danger. You never know which weird person, which strange person will take it into their head to hunt you down via your address and show up at your private residence. When Devant went and put out all these people personal phone number, the private phone number, me never issue if people work number out in the public domain. If you are a public servant and your work number out in the public domain, that is fine, right? That is fine, because your work number, especially if you are a public servant, right? Your work number is a number that they should be able to access you on if you have a work number. But if your cell phone is your personal private cell phone, why on earth are you putting people's private information, personal information out in the public domain? What you are doing is encouraging people to harass people. Harassment is a crime. And what you are also doing is encouraging people to intimidate people. Now, I understand that people have lost loved ones. I understand that people are angry. They're well within their right to be angry about it. Well within their right to be angry about it. But you are so angry that you have decided that you are going to lash out at people. You can't control yourself at all. You're so angry you have to lash out at people. And so here you have Inshan Ishmael encouraging people to share the private number. And listen, is the private number of the chairman of the board, and the general manager. In a situation like the one that took place last Friday, there are a whole line of people that could possibly be responsible for what took place before you even reach the general manager and the chairman. And I understand that how we are thinking about it is the general manager and the chairman are ultimately responsible. I get that. It is not that I don't get those things, but to decide that you are so angry about a situation that you are going to actually consider engaging in behavior that is possibly criminal and exhort other people, encourage other people to engage in behavior that is possibly criminal, I stop and I say to myself, well, yes, boy. Because is a large cross-section of our society this week reached that point, I don't know if all you recognize that, because I was looking at that. A large cross-section of our society reached the point this week where them so vexed and them so distraught and they so upset about things that they were actually willing to engage in behavior that was intimidatory and possibly criminal. And I sit down and I watch that. And I watch it because we are in a situation where we are emotional, we are upset, we are angry, and we are not in possession of the facts. We do not have all the facts on this issue at all. We know some of the facts, we know part of the facts, but we don't have all of the facts where this issue is concerned. And so that is where our major communication crisis is. Because what happened this week also kind of happened with the blackout, the power outage, the power outage in Trinidad a couple of weeks before. And I ain't talk about our outage here. I mention it, but we ain't going to know details about our power outage here. And that's because I waiting for the report. And I'm waiting for the report because only after we have gotten the report can we begin to dig into it. Because all you know me, I like to have my evidence and I like to build my timelines. But when that outage took place, there were a whole bunch of conspiracy theories abounding. Conspiracy theories were spreading left, right, and center that Wednesday evening into Wednesday night, because it's like early the Thursday morning that the entire island finally got back power. When this thing happened, it was like that, but even worse, because it was like conspiracy theories on crack cocaine. So let's get into it, because it's half an hour in and I talked about the Bacchs and how much we like the Bacchs, and now let's to some extent talk about the facts. Let's look at what we do know. So last week Friday evening, do I have the letter here? Yes, I do. Last week Friday evening, I lie down. And I lie down with my phone, right? And I scrolling through things and I looking at messages and whatever. lie down last week Friday evening. It was an evening that I should have been doing a live, but I put up a notice saying I ain't doing no live, and that's because, as I told you all on Sunday, I had hurt my knee, right? I injured my knee, and so it was painful and throbbing, and I was icing it and whatever, and I just didn't feel like sitting down with a painful knee doing this live. And a notification comes up on my phone, on my email. I am on the mailing list of a number of various entities as, you know, a source of media, a source of information. So I want to show you this. This is the first press release that was issued by Paria about the issue. And I want to show you this press release. We're going to look at this press release, and we're going to look at a series of things, and we're going to listen to a couple clips, because I want all you to start to understand what we know versus what we don't know about this tragedy. And when you start to gauge what you know versus what you don't know where this tragedy is concerned, you're going to realize that people fly off the handle and jump to plenty conclusions without information. So it says, on Friday, 25th February 2022. Actually, let me jump up. Rescue efforts are ongoing. So I open this press release and I see rescue efforts are ongoing. So I pause. Rescue efforts? What happened? What do you mean rescue efforts? So on Friday, the 25th of February 2022, private contractors from LMCS Limited were conducting an underwater maintenance exercise at the number 36 Sea Line Riser on Berth 6 at Paria Trading Company Limited. Point up here. During the exercise, an incident occurred which resulted in the loss of sight of the 5-member team which were being monitored from shore. The cause and extent are still being determined. Incident management protocols at Paria were immediately triggered. I want all you to pay attention to that. Incident management protocols at Paria were immediately triggered in accordance with established standards. At the time of issuing this statement, one member of the team has been found and is currently in a stable condition at the San Fernando Hospital. Further rescue efforts are currently underway with the support of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. I want all you to digest what I just said. This is a press release that I would have received before 6 p.m. that Friday. Right? This is a press release I received via email before 6 p.m. that Friday. Why am I repeating this? Because I want you all to understand that before 6 o'clock last week Friday, Paria put out a press release indicating the incident took place. They had triggered incident management protocols at Paria immediately. One of the team members had been found and was in a stable condition at the San Fernando Hospital. This is before 6 p.m. last week Friday. So by 6 p.m. last week Friday, we were aware, or I was aware, media, because this didn't just come to me. I am on a media list. So all media houses would have had this email in their system, letting them know what took place. So, let me pause, move away from the press release, and start to tell you what was going through my head. So I reading this out, and I am reading it out to a friend of mine. And I say, well, what do you think went on here? And the person says to me, the guy says to me, says, well, you can't know for certain. And he is absolutely right. This press release doesn't give you all of the information. You know that something was taking place. You know something taking place at sea. You know it was underwater maintenance. You know 5 people were in the water. You know 4 people disappear. You know 1 person was recovered and in the hospital. And you also know that they lost sight of the other 4 persons. So we know where it is went on. And at that point in time, we also did not know when exactly the incident took place. Now I want all you to grasp something here. With a diving incident, as a matter of fact, any kind of incident, timing, and a timeline is incredibly important. Paria sent out a press release the Friday evening. They sent out a press release around midday or mid-afternoon the Saturday. Then they sent out a couple other press releases the Saturday evening. Then Sunday there was a press release to indicate to people that there was going to be a press conference at 7:30 p.m. And in each of the press releases, the information was inadequate. It was insufficient information. And when you have lengthy spaces between press releases and between press releases that are inadequate in terms of information, what you leave is a massive vacuum, a massive echo chamber that allows other people to jump in and fill it up with noise. So Paria sent out that press release, and between that press release and the press conference that took place on the Sunday evening, so this is, like I said, roughly 6 o'clock Friday evening, and the next time the public would have gotten information that they could have bite into was the Sunday evening, and the information was poorly conveyed. Now, between Friday evening and Sunday evening, talk. Different people were doing lots of different videos, because I get up this Saturday morning and there was a video from a gentleman who said he was in that particular area and he was telling people what he felt would have happened. There was also by the Saturday night, either the Saturday night or the Sunday evening, there was a video, a live done by the young man who would have rescued the fifth person. So there was a whole series of things where members of the people who were either part of the rescue team, members of the family, or people from the energy community putting out their 2 cents, their 5 cents, their dollar, right? And so there was a whole bunch of information. And of course, as you know, everybody on Facebook became health and safety experts, dive experts. What else they became? Underwater welders. I mean, everybody was in a position where them knew everything. And of course, everybody started to send around the Delta P video. I'm not going into that. I am going to go into what we are aware of, right? The information that we have. So bear with me a few minutes, because we have to listen to a couple minutes of the press conference that Newman George and they held, right? Paria board and Paria management. And we had to talk about this press conference because I need to talk about the information they gave, and I also need to talk about where they went wrong. Bear with me.
Company Limited. We appreciate all of you attending and listening to today's press conference, especially at such short notice. We take this opportunity to express once again our deepest sympathy to the families, co-workers, and friends of the missing divers. We understand
the first problem here. If you are coming to speak to the public, an anxious public, a public that waiting more than 24 hours, actually by that point in time, it would have been roughly 48 hours, the public waiting for information. The public, the families waiting for information. You don't stand up and read out the statement from a podium in front of you. Bad form. Because what happened here is you distance yourself from an audience that was anxious. That's what you would have done. That's what Paria did here. Paria kept itself aloof and away and apart from a public that actively wanted to engage, to know, and even to be comforted, because people's anxiety levels were high. And our anxiety levels were high for a number of reasons, because you had all kinds of misinformation, all kinds of things just flying left, right, and center. And this immediately, in terms of layout, lighting, body language, needed to be done differently.
And recognize this is a very difficult and emotional time for you and all. Paria's personnel.
Now I want you to also listen, because they're using the right words, but how it's being delivered jars you. Because I had tons of people saying, I was seeing people commenting saying, oh, they didn't sound compassionate, they didn't this. When I listened to this today, so I turned it on, had on my headphones, I wasn't looking at the video, so I was listening to the words, and immediately offers condolences, indicates that they're here to give news, and you realize because they're offering condolences that it is bad news. And then after I listened to it, I then looked at it and I saw, okay, visually did not hit the right notes. Tisha Marie, I am going to address that point that you make there about the families and how they were communicating with the family. So I'm just putting your comment on screen. Tisha Marie says, to begin with, the family should have been brought into a conference room and not left in a car park and communicated with via WhatsApp. I'm going to address that because I got to the bottom of that, and what you are recounting there is not what exactly happened, but I'll get into it shortly.
In collaboration with LMCS and other key stakeholders, have focused on reaching the missing divers day and night since the incident occurred. Today, we are here to provide an update and information on the operations that transpired since and the next steps. We have with us today, from my left, Mr. Mushtaq Mohammed, the General Manager, Chairman Mr. Newman George, and Terminal Operations Manager and Incident Commander Mr. Colin Piper. I would now like to invite our Chairman, Mr. Newman George, to provide a current update.
Thank you, Narissa. Good evening to the media and to the listening and viewing public. A joint meeting with LMCS Limited.
Look at how long they take to move from her to move to him. And while they are waiting to move from her to move to him, there's her facial expression, right? And so because her facial expression looks that way, it comes across in a particular manner. Again, not necessarily the right sort of note that you want to strike. And you are hearing how nervous she is. She is incredibly nervous. I would imagine that this might have been the worst thing she's ever had to deal with as a communications person. But let's move on to Newman George.
Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, as well as independent subject matter experts.
Again, reading, right? And the thing is, you have the information down there, so you are not looking, you're not engaging, you are not speaking to the public at all. So let me pause here, and I want to show you something else. We're going to listen to 1 minute and 24 seconds.
Good morning. Good morning to my fellow citizens, to members of the media, to all of those who are looking on and viewing us as I go live with this press conference from the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries this morning, Monday the 28th of February, 2022. I am here today as the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries of the Government of Trinidad and Tobago, but I'm also here today as a father a brother, a son, a cousin, and a concerned citizen.
Do you see the difference? I don't even have to point it out to you all. Even though Minister Young is reading, he looks down, he looks up, he engages with the camera, and his voice, you get the sense of empathy. You get a tone that is warmer. Much, 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 much more different. Now, here's the thing. The Paria press conference, the most important parts of the Paria press conference, 9 minutes and 27 seconds long, because I listened to it several times. And it's the first 9 minutes where Newman George speaks, Mushtaq Mohammed speaks, Colin Piper speaks. And they all give information. All three of them give information. And they explain a range of things. But it is how they explained things. In the course of listening to Newman George, Mushtaq Mohammed, and Colin Piper, I was able to understand how the thing took place. But what I did not understand, and what people have been careful to avoid, is giving specific times and specific time frames. I want to move away from this particular part of things to get into the key thing that would have occurred. So on Monday morning, after that disastrous press conference, the Sunday night, where people were more focused on the body language than the content, the Monday morning, so Sunday evening, 7:30, disastrous press conference. People don't feel that they have been dealt with in a particular way. They don't feel that there's empathy. They don't feel that they have enough information. And of course, the thinking by then is, so they just decide that they're dead? How they decide that they're dead? How they arrived at that? And for me, that's one of the critical things about this entire experience. Paria did not take the time to get the public to understand the timeline so that the public could grasp why and how they arrived at the conclusion that they were no longer trying to rescue the divers. They were instead looking to retrieve the bodies. Paria didn't do that. Paria ought to have done that. And because they didn't do that, the country felt naked. The country also felt abandoned and hurt and abused. That's how people who were following the story felt. You were hurt, you were in shock, you were angry, you were upset. And so that's why I understood why people were lashing out. Now let me get to Tisha Marie's comment about having left people outside. Stuart Young on Monday, and you're going to hear it in his explanations shortly, actually indicates in the press conference that as early as Friday evening and Saturday morning, he would have given instructions to people at Paria to engage with the family in a particular way. He indicated that the family was to be treated in a particular way. They were to be communicated with. Somebody was supposed to stay in regular contact with them. And my understanding is that Paria actually offered a bungalow to relatives of the missing divers. So arrangements were being made to have the relatives of the missing divers be housed or to be able to stay on the Paria compound in one of the bungalows that they have on the Paria compound, and be provided with refreshment and meals and what, so that they could be there when anything happened and get updates and get news. And the family refused. That's my information from more than one source, that arrangements were made by Paria to accommodate the family, not to have the family wait outside under a shed out on the edge of Paria's compound, but rather for the family to be inside on the compound in a bungalow. And the family decided that they didn't want that. Right? So they refused. I am not in a position to say why they refused, nor am I even going to comment on why they refuse. I'm just going to say that contrary to what has been out in the public domain, efforts were made by Paria to offer the family hospitality and accommodations, and the families declined. Right? Further to that, instructions were given. So it's not even a situation where instructions weren't given. Instructions were given by the Energy Ministry's line minister. So the line minister for energy gave those instructions, and all of that is in the press conference. So when you listen, you realize that there is a lot of information in the public domain that we may have not paid attention to because we were very focused on our emotions. So the next interesting thing that happened that I was very happy about is this. Great boy. I was dying for an image of the actual site to know where things happened and what took place. We're going to listen to Minister Young explain it, and then we're going to come back to this diagram. And correct Anthony Morgan Beach, I believe that one of the reasons they would have opted to stay outside is that outside the compound there would have been cameras. They would have been in a position to speak with and interact with the media, and speak with and interact with, anybody else that they needed to speak with and interact with. So let's get into the explanation of that diagram, because the explanation of that diagram becomes very important when we start talking about the rescuing of the divers and all of the other things that we have been complaining about all week long. Because I was particularly perturbed to hear people talk about the Coast Guard this week as if the Coast Guard didn't want to make an attempt, right? So, but again, timelines, time frames, let we take we time and go through this. Only bear with me, we going past 8 o'clock tonight. So people in the UK who have to be up beyond midnight, I'm very sorry about you having to be up beyond midnight, but we're going beyond 8 o'clock this evening.
What you're seeing here are what are described as Berth 5 and Berth 6, which are offshore installations, and literally all you see coming up above the sea level are 2 pipes at the top. The one that has a heading above it, the hyperbaric chamber, is the berth where the work was being carried out by LMCS.
So let's pause. And let me bring myself onto the screen a little bit. So you see the top of the diagram, and I will go back and put the other image onto the screen. Where you see hyperbaric chamber, there. Up there is where the divers were located, right? This is according to Minister Young. That chamber was above the pipeline. So Berth 5 and Berth 6 are 2 pipelines that stick up in the air. Over Berth 6, the riser at Berth 6, there is a hyperbaric chamber. That particular piece of pipeline is 55 feet in length. So it goes down, then it goes across, then it goes up again. And so so you have pipe down, pipe across, pipe up. So you have berth 6, 55 feet, and that's where the divers would have they would have been at the top of that pipe. Then you have the pipe that runs across the seafloor, and that's 1,200 feet in length. And then you have berth 5, which is at the end of that, and that rises up again. And of course, the diameter of the pipe is 30 inches. Yes, 30 inches. I have Azar Gopal to take on, you know. If Azar Gopal working at Paria and Azar Gopal was there, then Azar Gopal could he could put out his own live to explain things. But since I go in with the Minister of Energy, got this and put it up, and I happy to go through that with all you. So I'm moving myself off the screen because I want to be able to let you all see things properly.
The hyperbaric chamber was inserted over this pipeline, and what it then does is it pumps out the water to create a airspace for persons to work in. The task at hand, as explained to me, was for them to change some basically nuts in a certain way on that to basically fix a leak on the pipeline, which was done successfully over the past week. And what was to take place on Friday now was the testing of the work that had been done and the removal of 2 flanges that had been inserted to prevent, along where you see that red pipeline coming out, to prevent liquids from coming up. And in that hyperbaric chamber is where these 5 men were working. 4 of them.
So I need to pause here. So the chamber up at the top there, where you are seeing, let me zoom in for you. This hyperbaric chamber so you're seeing where it's blue, and then beyond that, where it is clear again, you have there's a red line. I mean, you're not seeing the red line here, but when I show you the other image, you'll see the red line better. So according to Minister Young, that's where the 5 divers were. Up at the top there, that's where the 5 divers were doing work, and they had these 2 flanges underneath that chamber to prevent liquids from coming up into the chamber where they were working. I need you all to be clear on that.
With the divers working on it, the 5th man, who is our fortunate survivor, Mr. Budram, was actually the rescue diver, and hence the reason why he had on his tanks.
So for me, that was important, because up until Monday, I didn't realize that Mr. Budram, the diver that they were able to save, I didn't realize that he was the rescue diver. But let Minister Young finish, because this is about 4 minutes, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about everything. So let me stop interrupting.
Right where you see the red, which is in clear, meeting the blue, what you see as a riser at berth 5, there were 2 flanges installed there. The first one was a piece of rubber between 2 metal plates, and of course these flanges go and they meet between these 2 points. So they were inserted somewhere around here. 1, 2 pieces of metal and a rubber piece in between, and the second would have been an inflatable that was blown up. From what we can gather at this stage, unfortunately, when the first one was removed, something took place that created a suction, sucking the 5 divers in from what was a air chamber into this 30-inch pipeline that you see going along in the shape of a U. So I thought it important that we understand that at this berth 6, which is where the work was taking place, that this suction came in and something happened. There's then 1,200 feet running at the bottom, going across, parallel to the sea level surface, and then it connects with a U, an elbow, to the riser at berth 5. Again, another 30, that is the 30-inch pipeline. Sometime thereafter, in the rescue operations, the persons there managed to get 2 sets of equipment. One they actually got from Shell, I believe, which are ROVs that they sent down into the pipeline. It couldn't go in because you needed to send some sort of mechanical or technical equipment in to see what was taking place in this pipeline. Eventually, through one of the underwater cameras, you would, if you go back to the diagram, you would see from that berth 6 elbow along the pipeline, 120 feet, they met an obstruction that was diving equipment stuck. So far, I've been informed that the thought process is that this diving equipment is 2 air tanks that men were carrying on their backs, and that unfortunately blocked the ROV and the camera system from going any further to assist in the location of the men. This diagram sets out the type of operation that it is. You must understand that even though the berth 6 pipeline was cleared of fuels, there would still have been some residual fuel. There's always danger in performing these tasks. But this is what it is. So it was not a simple just dive in, go into the pipeline, as much as our emotions may want us to have done that. So the teams continue to work with the outside experts, LMCS and Paria together, to come up with options as how best to get past what you saw as those obstructions in the pipeline, the 1,200 feet of pipeline running parallel to the surface.
Right. Back to the diagram, and let's chat a little bit where this diagram is concerned. So let me bring that up, and let me bring myself up, putting myself in between here. Good. I am not a diver, but I have friends who are divers. I have dived maybe 4 times recreationally, and what's the deepest I would have gone? Maybe 30 feet or something like that. So I think is the deepest I would have gone. So there are a couple things we need to be clear about. When you dive, or when you go underwater and you are on equipment and you are on air, the air is pressurized air, and you have a situation where you've got oxygen in your system, you also have nitrogen building up in your system. Time is very important with diving, because the amount of oxygen you have and the depth of water you've got to go into determines how long you can be underwater for. And that's if you are diving with scuba tanks. My understanding is that when you are doing commercial diving of this kind, you tend to be fed with air from the surface. So you have an umbilical cord, like a sort of tube that is attached to you. So your hat and hose, as you hear people talking about that, hat and hose. And so you are being fed air from the surface while you are underwater. Now, my dive expert, he knows who he is, and he is on the live. At any point in time I have anything wrong, correct me. I have my phone in front of me, so feel free to correct me if I get anything wrong. Let me open up and make sure that I have it so I could get my corrections and thing if I have anything wrong. Good, cool, boom, we ready. So you are based on this diagram that we have in front of us here. 5 men would have been down inside the hyperbaric chamber. But we find out in the course of this press conference that one of the men, one of the 5, is the emergency diver, which then tells you that it's 4 men, 4 persons who would have been doing the actual maintenance work, the replacement of bolts, right? So Minister Young would have indicated what was the nature of the job. I didn't know what the nature of the job was until Monday. I also did not know that this incident took place around 2 or 2:15 p.m. in the afternoon on Friday. So I need you all now to walk with me in terms of the time for this thing. And there's a reason we have to talk about the time for this thing. Because, as I just said, the amount of oxygen you have on you and the source of oxygen you have on you is going to make a huge difference. So we are aware that these men were down in the chamber. What I don't know, what I am not yet clear on, is whether these men were being fed with oxygen from the surface. So did they have hat and hose feeding them oxygen, or did they have tanks? I don't know, and that's something the investigation needs to let us know. Because if they didn't have tanks on them and they were being fed with air from the surface and they were then sucked in, it then tells you that when they were sucked in, if the hose that was feeding them air cut or broke, then there would be no air for them once they were sucked in and that cut and broke. So that is important for us to find out. The other thing that we need to find out, that we need to be aware of, is whether there were more than one emergency diver around. Air, not oxygen, sorry. So we need to know how many other emergency divers were around. My understanding is in situations like this, it's supposed to be 1-to-1. So for each diver you have in the water, you should have another emergency diver around, should in case something happen with any of the divers. So if you had 4 divers in the water, ideally there should be, if you're going with the 1-to-1 ratio, there should be 4 emergency divers around. Who is responsible for having the emergency divers around? Is that the responsibility of the contractor? Is that the responsibility of Paria? Right? So there is that. So what time did the accident take place? We are told that the accident occurred around 2:15 in the afternoon. When the accident occurred, how long before emergency divers got into the water? How long before emergency divers were aware that something had happened, an incident had occurred, and got into the water? That's important. Did they have scuba tanks, or was it land-fed air? That is also important, because if they pull down underwater and they don't have tanks and it's land-fed air, that explains something. If they have tanks and they're underwater, based on what my diving people have said to me, the longest you would be able to survive for underwater with a tank on is between an hour to 90 minutes. And that hour to 90 minutes, that 60 to 90 minutes is important because, again, we're looking at time. So if the incident happened at 2:15, how much time passed before rescue divers went down into the water, and then before other people, the other rescue divers, would have been alerted to what took place? So we're going to listen to another video. This is a video that I have to pull up from Facebook for us to take a listen to. But when I heard this, it also had me thinking about, okay, so what really went on here in terms of the timeline, right? So give me a minute. I had to scroll for a bit. Oh my goodness. I had this thing. That's all. I had it lined up. I thought I had it lined up and queued up properly. Now it confused. Okay, see all posts. I'm gonna just have to scroll through posts. So, right, as I am scrolling through posts, what becomes really important is understanding when exactly it happened, how long they would have been underwater for before people started to try to rescue and try to put and have them out of the water. Because remember, a lot of what we've been arguing about all week long is that they could have been saved, they could have been rescued. Whether it's the Friday night or the Saturday morning, we kept arguing that the divers could have been rescued. If it was tanks, if it was land-fed air, all of those things are very important, very critical, and the amount of time they would have been underwater for, and the amount of air that they would have had access to, all of those things are very, very, very critical considerations. Why am I saying all of this? Because I suspect that by the time Friday night came along, Paria would have felt that these men had been underwater for such a long time that there was a possibility that they were no longer, they could no longer be saved. So just now, you know, the amount of posts I have, but this, I need you all to listen to this because I want you to, it's linked to time and what happened with respect to the rescue diver. Things just taking a little while to scroll here. This was not supposed to have disappeared. So I really, here we go. Here we go. Yes, no, I'm not hearing anything, so I have to. I'm not sure why I'm not hearing anything. Anyhow. This is annoying because this is pretty interesting information. I don't want to delete the post. I want to be able to. So the diver who rescued one of the men, he was talking. I shared that live to my news feed, and I don't understand now why I can't hear it, why the audio is off for it. Well, let me show you what you're going to look for. I want you all to go and look for this live, right? The diver who rescued one of the men speaks, and take a look at that. Because when he starts talking, when he starts indicating what took place, let me put myself up on it. When he starts indicating what took place, he says, and he mentions around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the incident took place. He got to the site more than an hour after the incident took place. What I want you all to remember is this. If the guys had tanks on and they had been pulled in to the pipeline, they could survive in that pipeline for between 60 minutes to 90 minutes with the tanks on, right? If it's surface fed air and they were pulled down and the line that was feeding them air cut, then there's no air for them down inside the pipeline. So if he got there more than an hour after the incident, and when he got there, he didn't actually go into the pipeline immediately. They would have rescued Mr. Budram, because Mr. Budram, who was the rescue diver, he was coming out, he was climbing out of the hyperbaric chamber covered in oil. So that's where they would have gotten Mr. Budram. They didn't go down into the pipeline yet to get Mr. Budram. And Mr. Budram was able to come out of the pipeline because he was up in the hyperbaric chamber. So the impression given is that he, as a rescue diver, had his scuba tank on, and he went in to try and get the others. I don't know who else had scuba tanks on. I'm not sure who else had scuba tanks on. But as you can see, based on this diagram here that Minister Young would have shown on Monday, and there's no reason for me to believe that that this is not what the two risers and berths look like. So they would have been here. This the chamber where you're seeing red, the red lines just over blue, and that's where there would have been air, and they would have been working in that area there. And then between the line, let me see, is it right? Between the line and between the line and the blue level where the water is, that's where they would have had the flanges. And whatever caused the suction happened, the suction was created, and the 4 divers who were there doing the maintenance, they got sucked in. And diving equipment gets jammed along the seafloor, and it makes it impossible for them to see beyond that. So when equipment was sent in down 55 feet and then across 120 feet, it got stuck. And so you were not in a position to see anything beyond that because of the diving equipment. So where does this leave us? Because like I said, I'm not here trying to talk about who right, who wrong, who guilty, who at fault. I'm not here to talk about that. I am here to talk about what we know. We know that 4 men were in berth 6 doing repairs. We know that an accident took place around 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. We know that if you are wearing tanks, you could survive underwater for about 60 minutes to 90 minutes. We know that if you are on surface-fed air and the cord gets cut, broken, whatever it is, then you are underwater with no air supply, no source of air. Unless there is some sort of air pocket that you're sealed into and you could breathe air there, like how the hyperbaric chamber allows for you to be able to breathe air, then you don't have air. By the time we don't know, and these are important things that we need to know. We need to know at what time the first set of rescuers, the first rescue divers who ought to have been on scene, when did they get into the water? We also need to know at what point in time did Coast Guard arrive there. Because one of the things we've been hearing all week long is that Coast Guard refused to go into the water. And we need to understand this. To do a rescue dive, you have to assess the risk. You have to be able to, using the information that you have, gauge and assess whether you and your other rescue divers can go in and actually rescue people and everybody come out alive. So if it's a situation where you get there and you don't have enough information and you are not clear that you will actually be successful, as a matter of fact, there's a possibility that there might be casualties, then rescue divers are not going to go into the water. Plain and simple. If there is a possibility that you will not be able to complete the job properly, rescuing who or what you need to rescue and keeping all other life intact, people aren't going to go into the water. So I understand that the other rescue divers showed up, went in, they were able to pull Mr. Budram out of the water. And when you listen to the live that was done by the rescue diver there, he talks about going into the water and going down 70 feet. Now, I'm not sure how exactly he went down about 70 feet if the pipe itself is only 55 feet in terms of depth. But he went down, and he said when he went down, he got to a particular point. He couldn't get past that particular point because there were tanks there. And if you got down that far and you didn't encounter any of the other divers, then it means that they would have been beyond the tanks. And if they themselves didn't have tanks on, again, I'm not sure if they had tanks on or not. If they didn't have tanks on, then once they were sucked in there without an air supply, then chances are they would not have been alive. And if they were in there with tanks on, so let's assume that they had tanks on, because the way people are speaking, that's how it sounds to me. If they did have tanks on, then the next question that you have to ask yourself is, did any of the rescue divers get there before 2 hours had passed? And if no rescue divers got to them before 2 hours had passed, why not? Because to me, once we get past that 2 hour time frame, and this is what I need you all to grasp, if the incident occurred around 2 p.m. or 2:15 p.m. on Friday, what is 2 hours? Add 2 hours to 2:15 p.m. Right? Because we go in with, let's say that they were able to, let's say they had tanks on and they were able to conserve air and breathe very slowly. 2:15, add 2 hours. That's about 4:15 in the evening. So by 4:15 in the evening, if they had tanks on, it was highly unlikely that they were still in a position to have oxygen. If they didn't have land, if they didn't have surface fed air on them underneath there, if those lines were cut, again, now bring in Coast Guard, and you are telling Coast, I don't know how far along in the chain of events Coast Guard would have been brought in. But if this happened at 2:15 and Coast Guard was brought there after 4 p.m. and was making an assessment of the situation, looking at how deep they have to go, how long persons may have been underwater for, with tanks, without tanks, there's every possibility that all of the professionals at the site at that point in time, all of the rescue professionals, because remember, the first press release said that they immediately went into risk management mode, they would have been thinking to themselves, all right, what are the options here? What are the possibilities here? And those are the things that we need to be aware of. And in all fairness, these are the things that I had hoped Paria would have discussed when they did the press conference on Sunday evening. I had hoped that Paria would show up and, of course, provide an empathetic and sympathetic response to the entire tragedy. Correct body language, tone, all of those things to convey to the population how tragic the event was, and then walk through the salient and pertinent information to get people to understand how diving works, to get the public to understand this is how we arrived at the conclusion that these gentlemen were no longer alive. And they didn't do those things. And when you don't do those things, you leave the path wide open for everybody else to run in with emotion and say a slew of things. Say it's a conspiracy. Say Paria tried to kill the men. Say Coast Guard want to kill the men. Say Paria don't care. And in all of this, we are not hearing about the actual contracting company. Up to now, up until today, I wasn't clear on what the job was specifically. Minister Young clarified that. I am not clear on whether the contractors, LMCS, I'm not sure if LMCS had emergency divers in the water there all the time. Nor am I clear on how many emergency divers they had. Nor am I clear on how many emergency divers were on land observing and why were they on land observing. I'm not clear on what time the call went out to say an emergency has taken place and we require assistance. I don't know. We don't know. If I don't know, it means that we don't know. Because once I know, I go lay all you know. All you know that. So because we are not clear about, well, we know the time the incident occurred. We don't know who was the first person on site, as in the first rescue diver on site. We don't know what time the first rescue diver got into the water. We don't know how long they stayed in the water for. We don't know when the other rescue divers got there, like the specific time. Up to now, I have not heard the specific time that the other rescue divers got there. And we don't know, we're not clear on how long the men would have been underwater for before the other rescue divers came. So there are a lot of things we don't know. And I am hoping that the investigation gives the population that kind of timeline. I am really hoping that people can have a clear sense of what happened from 2 or 2:15 p.m. Friday afternoon all the way to the retrieval of the bodies. A clear timeline. Who did what took place, who made what decisions when, so that way everybody knows. Everybody is aware, and we are clear on who had responsibilities for what, who was supposed to this, who was supposed to that, who was supposed to ensure that the men had whatever it is the men needed to have. And so that way, all of this mudslinging and blame throwing and acting as if we, a country that in the energy sector for more than 50 years, don't know we are some we elbow, can come to an end. At some point in time, I'm going to come back here to talk about Paria management. But tonight is not the night to talk about Paria management. Tonight, I wanted to talk about what we know and what we don't know with respect to this particular issue. 4 men were on a job. 5 men end up in water. Suction took place. They got sucked down into a pipeline. 1 man managed to escape. 4 men died. What created the suction? We don't know what created the suction. That is another important thing. Right? So folks, there we have it. I want to wrap things up there because I know this is a very sensitive issue for people. For the families of the men, I can say condolences. I extend my condolences. I can't even begin to understand what you're going through. When I read that first press release from Paria on last Friday evening, I felt sick to my stomach because as soon as I read the press release, I knew something really bad had happened. And by the time that press release got sent out, people were pretty certain that things rough. So I saw that and I said to myself, this ain't looking good. And then by Saturday morning, when I knew they hadn't found the other 4 men, I was like, that's it there. It is unfortunate. It is incredibly tragic. And I hope that Paria puts things in place to ensure that this kind of foolishness does not happen again. I also hope that as a population, as a society, we could stop running with gossip, running with old talk, just running down talk for the sake of talk, and from time to time kind of step back and apply logic. Because you see, this last week of rumor mongering and fear mongering and conspiracy theories, it sucked plenty energy out of me. I almost didn't want to talk about this issue because it's such a sensitive issue. But I felt we needed to pause, take a breath, and figure out what we know versus what we don't know. I also don't think it's doing the family any good to be creating and generating all of this anxiety. So, deepest condolences to them, and also deep condolence to the country, because this rocked the country as well. A lot of people are very, very, very angry and upset about what happened here. And that's because you feel as if this could have happened to you. Right? So, To all of my Facebook dive specialists and all of my Facebook HSC experts and all of my Facebook forensic scientists and all of the other expertise that you all developed in the last week, I hope you all learned something from this evening. I hope you learned about what you know versus what you don't know. You all have yourselves a good evening. I will see you on the weekend. Okay? Bye.